Hey guys, BBI here. I want to stop and say thanks for tuning in and checking out whatever the video is about that's about ready to come up next. If you could take a minute and hit subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoy what you've seen here, make sure to hit the like button. We'd greatly appreciate your support. Anyhow guys, all that aside, let's get on with the show. So I'm sitting at dinner tonight, and I'm getting caught up on my phone, and I'm going through my my phone, and a friend of mine sent me a video about a silver $50 that he picked up from the bank, and he's showing me this video. Now I know nothing about money, and I'll never pretend to know anything about sequential numbers or stars on bills or the grade or any of that. I got a guy by the name of Mike, super smart guy that I've met. He's in Texas. He owns a huge he's part of a multi-million-dollar corporation company, Conglomerate Corp, where they travel around the country and they grade, evaluate, and help auction different styles of money. And I just thought, man, I'm just going to stick that away in my back pocket. That guy, what he does, those kinds of things, for whenever I manage to inherit my millions from people. I don't have anybody in my family that's worth any money. I'm never going to inherit millions. I just say, I'm just saying. You all know the guy. He's the guy that knows way more about it than the rest of us. Well, my friend knows a lot about $2 bills and, well, all kinds of currencies. He especially knows coins because of another business that he's into. And so he's explaining to me the different grades and the different qualities and the different things to look for. And it dawned on me, that's when the light came on. I need to do a video about 3500Zs. The reason I need to do this video is because I've got 4 tubes that are in here right now that I've got to test tonight. Well, 6 tubes that I got to test tonight and tomorrow in the different projects that I'm working on. So I thought, well, let's do a video about the things to look at when you're going and you're looking at a 3500Z tube. Okay? Now this is just what I have learned, taught myself. I'm sure there's the tube whisperer out there that goes to sleep with like an 8877 shoved in his butt's holes or something at night, and that's all he dreams about is tubes. Okay? This is, to me, it's not that. This is part of just the process of understanding what I have in my hands to what I can expect out of the part, roughly. And let me also say this very clearly, up front, unequivocally. You cannot tell what a tube is going to do as far as output is concerned by looking at it visually. But you can get a pretty good idea. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I have seen 3500Zs that looked like burnt ball sack ass crap. And they were full output and running like they'd never had an abused minute in their life. But in the same breath, I've had tubes that looked really, really good that were completely dead. And what I mean by look really, really good is everybody looks at it and goes, ooh, bottle of glass. Let's go over the different gradients, the different things. This morning, I stayed up all night working on getting moved into my computer, my new computer that I just built. Me, my wife, and I had a lot of help on that, you guys. I used to build computers when I was a kid. The world has changed. I put the computer together, then I had a whole herd of my friends, uber dork friends that I love and adore. And I use the term dork lightly because I respect these guys. I had one of the head software guys at Linux here last night. He's an actual official Red Hat guy. He was hanging out with me. His wife, who I feel is probably the second smartest computer person I know. She is a software developer and she helps and develops apps and all kinds of other things and independently evaluates them for multiple different companies. I had another friend over today. He's the only human being I ever have met who, as a bet, we bet him $100 that he couldn't go in and pass his technician exam at the Hamfest one time. He went in and sat down and walked out in extra class. in one afternoon. We never knew what was happening. He just went in there, did the test. He never came back out. 2 hours later, he walks out and he goes, well, first off, he comes walking out and the whole room stood up and gave him a standing ovation because nobody had ever seen that before. And he passed his technician. He missed one question on his technician questionnaire, his test, and then aced the other 2. Just in out. One day, walked in, not an amateur, walked out extra class. He is a systems something development something head of something overseed something engineer. And he's one of these guys that when you go to his house, you literally have to duck to pass the network cables to get in the front door, kind of thing. And you gotta be careful where you're stepping because you might step on a 200 gig hard drive just laying on the floor because to him it's like garbage. Kind of like I am with the radio. I had all these people surrounding me. I had a lot of help on that. So I got moved in, unpacked, and kind of understand what I need to do to have different software to achieve what I want. So I got that done, and I'm sitting there just thinking, I'm like, man, I want to go over this with the guys and want to have a minute to talk about it. So we're going to start here. Now we're going to shoot the rest of this, and I'm going to bring in each one of these tubes as different examples of what to look for different reasons. We're going to shoot this against a white background to have a higher contrast. You'll understand what I'm talking about here in a minute. Now there's schmutz on the outside of this tube, as in like there's little flicks of flux and so forth. But what we're looking at the tube, now let's pretend you're going to Hamfest, and the guy's got a 3500Z tube sitting there on the table, and he's got $150 on it. So now you have that 1 minute. It's like looking at a used car. Is this tube really worth $150 or is it worth $30? And we're going to teach you the different gradients, the things to look at passively that you can do quickly visually to help you establish the value of the tube. Okay? These tubes new in the box, like the last 2 that I just sold, are $239 hairs a piece. $240 a piece as of this date of 1/11 or whatever it is of 2020. They're only going to go up in value. So let's say this is a brand new tube. It's been used in 2 amps and just as a testing piece of equipment. Both of those have been on video. So we know what the thing's going to look like generally when it comes out of the box. This is it. So the very first thing I always look at is the clarity of glass. It is unbelievably dictating what the glass looks like. And the only way without fooling your eyes is to put it against something white. Either it be a white table or hold it up kind of to the sky. And you want to be able to look through the glass and it not be dark in this area and dark around the bottom. Okay? Those are your biggest key tellers of what's going on inside the tube. As you're running the tube, as your grids go through their process of operation, and as the anode, cathode, and all the components inside the tube go through their operation, as the tube starts to come to the end of its life, it'll start to off-gas part of the metal particulate that's on the inside of the screen. The anode and the cathode on the inside will start to outgas. And you'll have something like this. Clear, crystal clear glass versus darkened glass. Okay? This isn't shadow, this is literally the glass from here down is dark. As the inside of the tube has started to disintegrate from use, it changes color. Now, don't let your eyes deceive you. See how this is a lighter color gray, our anode? You see how the top bell is darkened and the bottom bell and the middle of the body is darkened? That isn't shadow, that's physically discolored from the heat. As the tube goes through its motion of coming to the ends of its life, as the gas starts to come off the metals on the inside, it reseats back onto the inside of the glass, it coats the inside of the glass and makes it a little bit darker. And then it starts to coat the inner parts of the tube. Now, I read an article one time which was very interesting to me. This guy claims, in this article, claims, he uses very big words and the article is very long. You can go type it in, 3500Z regeneration, or rejuvenation. He claims that if you would follow a certain heating cycle, you can heat the tube up, and goes into a big long explanation of how you can drive the material to the outside of the wire and I don't buy any of that horse poop. I know the fact that when you go and you change a metal state and get it hot enough that it goes to a gaseous form, it gets ionized and it's literally etched to the inside of the glass or the inside of the bell. There's no way to make that redrive or reattach itself back to its metal bits on the inside. It's now been electrically separated. Without, I mean, I'm sure we can do it, but we're going to end up damaging the tube even further. So, I don't know. He claims it works. Tried to replicate his results with a completely flat tube, actually, this one, and it was a complete failure. So we're looking at the clarity of glass. Now I'm going to tell you the other telltale signs. Let's move this little guy out of the way. We're going to go up here and we're going to look at the anode tip. On a brand new tube, it's going to have one little ring mark on it. You see that little ring mark right there? Like right here? It won't have a mark on it on a brand new tube, but if this has been in and out of multiple different things, you'll be able to see there's little tiny circular etches that are all the way around the top of this cap from where people have taken their anode cap with their set screw and screwed it down on the tube. Okay? I mean, just standing here and looking at this through the glass, you can see it's discolored. It's a little bit brown. But every time you see a little ring mark, and they're real faint, you got to let your eyes just kind of relax, but there's little tiny ring marks. There's one there, right there. Another one there. Another one there. Another one there. There's another one right on the edge of the set screw, its actual set screw itself. And there's another one there. That means this has been in and out and had different sets of anodes. Usually anode caps go on a tube and they stay on a tube in a logical sense. The tubes might come in and out 100 times, but when they change owners, the guy always takes the anode cap with it. So every time a tube's been through a different set of hands, it's like a new set, it's like a used car. Do you want the car that's been owned 50 times, or do you want the car that's been owned once? We're trying to evaluate the life the tube has had before it's come to your hands. We're going to look at the base of the bell here. The silver shiny bit. Once again, new versus old. Now the only reason I venture to do this video is because I've now finally broken into the land of 4K. And I know the video quality that you guys are going to be looking at this in is going to help you see the differences. It's not as shiny. Once again, the outgassing of the tube internally tells you everything. Then we're going to go and we're going to look at the stickers that are on the outside. This tube has obviously been very, very, very hot. That tells you a lot. The texture of the writing, the paint that's on the tube, tells you a lot too. So we have two kinds of tubes. We've got a graphite bell tube, and then we have our graphite folded sleeve tube like this. We're going to come back to this. Now, the other thing that we're going to look at is the color of our pins. These pins here. I need an incredibly bright white light for this. The second hottest part of the tube depending on what amplifier it's in, are those pins. Hopefully we can get this to come out. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. Let's zoom in here. So let's look at these pins. You see the color of the pins? You see how they're discolored in orange? I know you guys can see that. And now the hue of the glass is starting to show up. Once again, let's look at the new tube. They're not orange at all. That's your getter, by the way. This right here is your getter. So after they make in the factoria, they magnetically heat that tip. They only heat this piece of metal. It's a sacrificial piece of metal. And it's in turn attached to this plate. But they use a circular inductor ring and they heat that little flat plate. That's your getter. So we're going to ignore the color of that one pin, but we're looking at the rest of these. And we're looking at all of our connection joints. Now look at how clear that glass is. Versus this. See the discolorization of the pins? And the absolute most telling thing about a 3500Z in its life when you're at Hamfest is going to be, wow, this is so dark. Thought this light is so dark. As you take the, I don't want to drop you, come here. You take the tube, you're going to roll it around in your hands, and then you're going to roll it over. Let's look at our pins. Let's take a minute and talk about our pins. Most 3500Z amplifiers have, well, basically shit cooling. The guys that originally designed the amps never thought in their wildest dreams that we would be here 40, 50, 60 years later still running these tubes. So they designed things to have a service window of probably 10 years, roughly. And then they did a calculated assumption on how often you were going to replace the tubes versus a calculated amount of operation. It's the way they do things. Look at those pins. Now there's a difference. You're going to have forced air cooled tubes like what's inside of a Henry or whatnot, where there's air forced against the bottom of the tube. It encapsulates the thing in a complete envelope of air, cool air, and the pins won't desolder themselves. The filament pins on the 3500Z take so much heat. They discolor this Bakelite style of plastic. So when you see this, and you see these here, now that doesn't necessarily mean the tube's bad, but it is screaming out to you with the words that it can use as a tube and says, hey, I've had a rough life. And then we're going to start looking at the tips of the tubes. This has obviously been resoldered. It's been resoldered with the wrong kind of solder. The tips of 3500Zs do not use standard solder. They use a silver solder, which has a much higher melting point, and it has a much faster set point. What I mean by that is the window on a scale of heat from liquid to solid is very small, and we'll say on a chart, we'll say over here is where normal solder's at. Silver solder's over here in temp, and the window between liquid and solid's about that big versus down here it's like this big. Okay? Let's take a look at a new tube. Okay. Those are your basic, very quick, walk up, don't even need to talk to anybody about what you're holding in your hand. Help you as a human being identify what you're looking at. So, let's do a little test. Ready? Here we go. no sticker. The painting isn't discolored. Okay, now we know that this tube hasn't been awfully hot for a long period of time in one operation. Uh-oh, what's this? Let's look through our glass. What do we have here? Our pins are nice and shiny. That means it's had a good working environment, but what is that little curlicue thing hanging down? That's part of the filament. Once again, new tube, old used tube. Now this tube we know has been dropped. We know this because I dropped it. This is one of my old bench tubes. Okay. Now, that being said, let's look at our pins. Let's do our pin evaluation. When I bought these tubes, I bought them used because I couldn't afford anything else. So check this out. Should help you see it. New tube on the left, old tube on the right. Now, the glass tells you the most. This doesn't concern me that much. This really doesn't. Okay, so somebody's dropped the solder on them. No big deal. Somebody's resoldered them. The pins are somewhat smooth. They're not going to stretch out my fingers. The finger stock that's in the sockets. It's not burnt, but it's been hot. We can tell it's been hot here. When this tube, before it got dropped, was making full output. There was no heat transference to the pin legs, and our glass is nice and clear. Once again, old glass, old tube. See the discoloration? It's not shadow. It isn't. That's not your eyes playing tricks on you. That's literally the clarity of the glass. You can see the orange tint in this one versus nothing here. But the base of the tube, the clarity of the glass, the beauty of the print is all dictating factors. But what I was wanting you guys to look for is that there. The obvious, very obvious problem with the filament. This tube is worth nothing. It's absolutely worthless. But in the same breath, this is a famous tube. It's been on a lot of YouTube videos, and I got a guy over here. I'm going to sign this tube. I'm going to send it to him. They're going to raffle the tube off, but they're going to raffle off part of the tube as a light to help pay for a break. The other thing is you're going to look at the tube and see if it's got any little bits in it that are floating around on the inside. You see any kind of particulate floating around on the inside of the tube, it's worthless. The other thing I do is this thing called the tink test. We're going to pretend the microphone is your ear. You're going to take the tube, hold it up next to your head, very carefully rotate the thing next to your ear, and listen for any tinking. Once again. Now, I don't know about the rest of you guys. I'm a fairly young man at the moment. It is a fleeting thing in all men's lives, including my own. If I don't have the greatest eyesight, instead of me getting out glasses that are 6 inches thick and trying to figure this out while I'm standing in the parking lot with a bunch of people walking around next to me, hold the tube next to your head and very slowly rotate it. And the tinking noise is high enough pitch that you'll be able to spot it immediately. Okay, completely different style of tube. Ready? Here we go. Mark, mark, a mark. Mark. You can see it very clearly. Another mark. Another mark. So now we're going to look at the print and the clarity of the glass. Now the print here is really faded. But sometimes what happens is guys, they'll have the tube, and like this, it's got schmutz all over the outside of the tube. They'll take an ammonia-based window cleaner, they'll spray it on the tube, and they'll wipe it down with a paper towel. And when they bring the paper towel back, all the print is completely gone off the tubes. The ammonia attacks the paint. The paint has been heat tempered, heat worked, and it'll wipe right off the glass every time. And if you're lucky, you get a little shadow of paint. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like with heat damage here in a minute. But once again, let's take a minute. Let's look at our pins through the bottom of the glass. Old tube, newer tube. Looking at that right there. Appreciate every single one of you guys. Have a good night. Bye-bye. Okay. Now we're going to go and we're going to look at our pins. This black discolorization concerns me a lot. Let's look at the two differences here. You're going to have this in a used tube. You're going to have this kind of heating that's taking place. But that, what this amount of heat discolorization tells me is that the guy, when he went and tried to resolder the pins, he did it with a butane torch. Okay? And the heat transferred from the torch down to the plastic. Or not the plastic, it's the Bakelite. So, now we're bubbling our solder out. And then they did the next trick they could think of to try and hide the amount of heat that's been applied to these pins from them soldering it, is they started rubbing on it and scratching it with their finger and whatever else they could think of. You see it now? Those little tricks, just being able to spot those differences, can save you a lot of heartache. From normal in-socket heat wear to torch. See the difference? When they heated these pins, they had the torch at this angle. It's all there. The information's there. You just got to know what you're looking at. Okay. So now, let's take ourselves a look for what is what I call a folded carbon wrap. There's the same kind of carbon on the inside of this, and graphite, and whatever else you need to have on the inside to make the magic spew work. Make some more poop comes out the top end of the anode. But they've got it on a folded piece of metal that has been coated. The first place I start to look on these tubes for heavy use wear is right in here. And then you're going to look at the quality of the gray, the overall gray of each one of the fins versus a newer one. See the difference? This has had a rougher life. And then we're going to look right in the middle, right in here, right in here, right down at the very internal bit of the fin. Why is that important? Where do you think most heat's going to build? It's going to be generated right within about this much of the tube, and then it's going to travel outwards. It's going to wick outwards. Okay, so now we've seen our visual differences. This is one of the tubes that has been sent here for me to evaluate. Let me take the anode cap off the tit. Start at the top. You see it? I can see it with my naked eye. I don't know if it'll translate to camera, but that's where the anode cap was originally hooked up at. It's pretty much the only mark. So now we're going to look at the clarity of glass. Let's step back into perspective. We're going to look and see how translucent it is. Not bad. Here's really bad at the end of its life. Here's middle of life. Here's new. So we'll do new, middle of life, end of life. The only thing we're looking at is the clarity of the glass. Okay. Now we're going to look at our print. You see it? The H and the Z and the hazard. The reason that most print doesn't go down past the middle portion of the tube is because the closer we get down here to the bottom, the heat changes dramatically. So we know that this tube has gotten hot, but not enough to make me scared. And what I mean by scared is this is heated down and not wiped. Look at the print. At one point or another, that was red. I guarantee it. The red pigment's been completely cooked off. This is going to discolor just from normal life operation. Alright, so what's our next step? We're going to go and evaluate our pin legs. Here is all we're looking at. Nice and silvery, shiny, pretty, looks good. We're going to give it the quiet little tink test. And we're looking for little particulates of shit floating around on the inside of the tube. And last but not least, this has been used. It's been used in a pressurized environment. We're going to look at the coating and the edges of the tubes, or the pins. These have never been filed. They're not all scuffed to shit from being in and out. Here, let me grab my sloppy whore. These are all scuffed to crap from being in and out of so many different sockets. See that? The base tells you so much. so much data that can be taken from this. The print on the base, there's not any discolorization on the edges. And even if you look like right down in here, that tells you a lot too. Look at how dark that is in there. Okay, I am fairly certain that this tube here is going to work. And it's going to be pretty close to full output. It would not surprise me. But you have no true way, and I cannot emphasize this enough, no true way to tell what a tube actually does unless you put it in a socket and run it. Okay, so last tube for us to evaluate is this one here. Ready? Here we go. Ah! Too far. Now we're going to look at the clarity of glass. See how that pin's discolored? Now which pin does that go to? Or one that's got a titty on the end of it. These are our filament leads. The legs themselves are not beat all up. They have been in and out of things several times. But these two pins, once again, so it was in something that was forced air cooled because our plastic isn't discolored. Our pins have gotten really hot from operation. Our print, made in the People's Republic of China. Made in San Marcos, California, IA. Let's see here. Did I add another RF parts tube out here? I do. People's Republic of China. It's one of our brand new ones. Yep, even by law, they have to have printed on them where they were made. So, hopefully that helps you guys understand. This tube, as far as like using it for amplification, is worthless. It's still worth a little bit of money because somebody can turn it into a light or put it on a shelf. So it's worth 15, 20 bucks. It's completely worthless. This tube is worthless. Okay, it's got zero output. The filament light's on it, but it's really dim. It's got zero output. And I probably would not put high voltage to this. I'd be afraid it would short out. This is a customer's tube, and we're going to try this here in his amp here in just a little bit. It's going to be in the next video. We're going to see what we get out of it for power. This one is also a customer's tube. I feel fairly confident that both of these tubes will work to full output potential. If these were Hondas, I would say that they're probably 50,000 mile Hondas. They probably still got another easy 250,000 miles worth of life in them. Okay. This old guy here. This is a 400,000 mile Honda. In the last 200,000 miles, I have not changed the oil in the motor. Technically, it'll still run, but you'd be lucky you get to make it down to the come and go gas station to get anything to drink. Just telling you. This thing here, this is your typical 30,000, 40,000 mile Honda that's got a blown motor in it. You got to look at all the little nuts and bolts and pieces. This thing here, my Anaconda don't want none of this big buns, hun. Just don't want it. Once again, worthless, at the complete end of its life, done. Turn it into a lamp. Well, guys, this was quick, it was fun, it was down, dirty, and easy. Look, you're going to be able to very easily now, the next time you go to a Hamfest, you're going to walk up to a table full of tubes, you're going to pick the tubes up, and you're going to be like, okay, I watched BBI's video, and you're going to look at it, you're going to hold it up, and you're going to go, looks pretty clear to me, or, looks awfully dark to me through the glass, So you're going to see the dark and the clarity of the glass, and you're going to, oh, okay. We're going to go look at our anode cap and see how many scuff marks are all the way around from the little set screws on the anode caps. How many scuffs are up here? All right, so it's been in and out of so many amplifiers. Oh, all right. And you're going to sit there and you're going to look at it, and you're going to look at the color discoloration on the, and you're going to, okay, let's take a look at the quick pins. Let's take a quick look, and you're just going to, oh, yeah, all right. You're going to flip it over, and you're like, oh, okay. And you'll know. You'll be able to properly identify it and go, oh, this tube here, let's say, is at Hamfest. And the guy at Hamfest is talking to you, doing the salesman's pitch. Man, I pulled that from a working amplifier. It was still a full output. Would you rather take a risk on a tube? And he wants $130 for that. Or you pick one up and he wants $130 for this one. Glass is clear and virginal. Smoked out in orange, kind of gray. Look at the pins. Look at the pins. Look at the plastic. Look at the plastic. Which one are you going to take a risk on? Knowing that you can take it home and it can totally destroy your amplifier if you hook it up straight away without doing an air bottle test on it. Air bottle test is where you take the tube, you put it into the socket, you do not apply high voltage to it, you turn the amplifier on, you watch the tube run. You sit there and wait to see if the filament burns up because the tube has lost its vacuum or not. Otherwise, do you have a bottle full of air? If it doesn't fill up with white smoke, shut the amplifier off, wait for your high voltage to completely dissipate, run down to zero, short, ground, isolate, control your high voltage circuit after it's unplugged. Then hook up your high voltage and then turn the amplifier on. That's an air bottle test, by the way. Which would you rather take the risk on? This tube, knowing what you know now, or this tube? I'd offer him 15 or 20 bucks for this and smile, because you're being honest. He's the one that's trying to upsell you. Now he knows what he's got, and he knows what you're looking at. The only difference is this one's got shit floating around in the inside of the tube that you can't hide, and it doesn't pass the tink test. Tubes are just like cars, by the way, you guys. Tube new in box with the packing tape still on it is worth exactly what it is worth if you bought it from the manufacturer. Roughly. It's like going to a brand new car lot. You're going to go buy a brand new car, and the instant you open that box, you've just lost about a quarter of the value. And the longer you run it from there, the value goes down and down and down and down. This tube was $230. It's now worth about, with it being in 2 amplifiers, running 2 videos now, having a total of maybe 3 hours worth of use time on it, from $230 is now worth $150 on a good day to the right guy. Just because it's not in the box. Keep that in mind. And the same thing, us ham guys are very sticklers. We keep the boxes for everything we buy. My wife doesn't get it. I have a whole closet full of icon boxes. Why do you save these? Because it increases the value of the device. Ham guys save their tube boxes because they understand that if they have the tube boxes, it's going to add slightly more value to the tube. The tube is a complete unknown, but if you got the box with the original packing material, the $25 tube is now worth like $35–40. It's a fact. Simply is what it is. That and the overall packaging is more impressive. To pull the tube out of the packaging, the original packaging material, versus having it just out floating around free. You're like, wow, okay, so we got the original box. The box isn't completely beat to butt ass. The foam isn't all broken down from being pulled in and out 300 times in and out of the box. And then you go and you look at the tube. Hopefully this is helpful, you guys. Gentlemen, I gotta run. I got a bunch of other stuff I gotta do. I gotta put another SP220 right here on the workbench, and I've gotta add all of these parts to it that I built last night. Bunch of Harbach parts. I built the little Harbach rectifier or capacitor bank. And the new metering board, high voltage rectifier board. Got an SP220 these have to go into. Gentlemen, my name is BBI. And without a shadow of a doubt in any mud duck's mind, I'm the biggest mud duck in Idaho. Come check us out, www.bbiamps.com. Not a lot of anything I do with that webpage other than here's my phone number and this is my mailing address. Come follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube. And please, I like what you've seen. You find it educational. It might have helped you out a little bit. First time you've ever checked out one of my videos and you like it, click subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. I appreciate the support. See you, gentlemen. I gots to run. Hey guys, BBI here. I want to stop and say thanks for tuning in and checking out whatever the video is about that's about ready to come up next. If you could take a minute and hit subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you enjoy what you've seen here, make sure to hit the like button. We'd greatly appreciate your support. Anyhow, guys, all that aside, let's get on with the show.